At 18, Mariah Dawson stood on the dusty platform of Rosewater Station with nothing but a frayed satchel, a racing heart, and the faint echo of her father's final words, "This is the only way, girl." The rancher paid good money for Udrian as the train hissed away, like an iron serpent disappearing into the bleeding orange sky. She realized she was truly alone, sold like cattle to a man with 3 children and a reputation that made even hardened cowhands lower their voices. A man called Elias Creed, a widowed rancher known across the frontier as cold, disciplined, and unbreakably silent, except when giving orders that made grown men tremble. She expected a monster, a tyrant, someone who would bark commands the moment he saw her. But when he approached, broad-shouldered, sunburned with steel-gray eyes that held storms instead of cruelty, he simply tipped his hat and said, "You look scared, miss." "Don't be." And those 3 words hit her harder than a desert wind, because no one had comforted her in years. Yet she didn't trust it, didn't trust him, didn't trust this entire forced future waiting in the wide-open unknown. She followed him to the wagon, stiff and quiet, while his 3 children, Luke, the oldest at 12, with a jaw already set like a man's, Rosie, 9, sharp-eyed and curious, and tiny Caleb, who hid behind his father's leg, clutching. A wooden horse peeked at her like she was a ghost that had wandered out of a storm. And Mariah wondered why a family like this needed her, why a man already burdened with loss and responsibility would buy a girl barely grown. But when the wagon rolled toward the horizon, she sensed the weight of whispers around her, whispers about Elias's tragic past, about the accident that killed his first wife, about the ranch hands who swore they saw him bury something more than grief in the ground beside her. The Creed ranch rose in the distance, fences stretching like the ribs of a sleeping giant, horses roaming like shadows, and cowboys pausing mid-work to stare at the new girl sitting beside the boss, some with pity, some with envy, some with dark interest. And Mariah's pulse hammered, with dread because she had no idea what life inside this place would shape her into. But she soon learned Elias Creed wasn't the kind of man rumors made him out to be. He was worse in some ways, better in others, a man carved out of duty and silence, who brought her into his home and told the children, "This is Mariah. She's here to help, and she's under my protection." Words that sent shockwaves through the ranch yard, because no one, not even his foreman, had ever heard him claim someone so boldly. Resentment simmered among the ranch hands, mostly from Travis Boone, a cruel-eyed cowboy known for breaking horses and rules with equal ease, who glared at her like she was an invader, stealing the attention of a man he feared yet idolized. And Mariah, desperate and determined, swallowed her fear as she stepped into the house where memories still clung to every wall, where the ghost of Elias's first wife seemed to watch her with unspoken warnings. But she worked anyway, cleaning, cooking, helping the children, nursing the wounded calf in the barn, and slowly she saw the truth. Elias wasn't cruel, he was careful. He wasn't cold, he was wounded. And yet, the more she tried to fade quietly into her role, the more the frontier began to stir with tension, because Elias's declaration had drawn eyes, dangerous eyes from neighboring ranchers, wandering drifters, and men who believed a girl sold at 18 was easy prey. But they were wrong. Something in Elias shifted every time Mariah walked past, something protective, something dangerous, something the entire frontier soon felt when one violent night a group of armed riders stormed the ranch demanding Mariah be returned, claiming she'd been promised elsewhere. But Elias Creed stepped forward with a rifle in hand, eyes blazing like a man resurrected. And with a voice that echoed across the dark fields, he said, "She belongs to no one, except to my house, under my name, and under my protection." And that moment, those fierce words, silenced the whole frontier and changed Mariah's fate forever, awakening an unstoppable story of loyalty, danger, forbidden tenderness, and a bond neither of them expected, but both were destined to face as a deadly threat crept closer through the night. And this was only the beginning. The morning after Elias Creed stood against armed men in defense of Moriah, the entire frontier seemed to hold its breath, as if the land itself understood that something irreversible had begun. And Moriah woke with the memory of his voice, strong, unshaken, claiming her protection before gunmen, echoing like thunder in her chest, making her question everything she thought she knew about the man she had been sold to, because no one had ever raised a weapon for her before. No one had ever stepped between her and danger. And as she walked out into the dawn light where the ranch hands moved with unusual caution, she felt dozens of eyes on her, some suspicious, some begrudging, some fearful, but all aware that the boss had made a stand that would ripple across Rosewater Valley for years. Elias was already in the yard, tightening the cinch on a restless bay stallion, jaw clenched and shoulders tense, and when he looked up at her, something flickered behind his eyes, something unspoken, something protective, something he didn't know how to express. And he simply said, "We'll have trouble coming. You stay close to the house today." But Moriah, whose spirit had been hardened by years of being traded like a burden, leveled her chin and replied softly, "I'm not as breakable as you think," which made him pause, staring at her with an expression halfway between admiration and worry, as if he was realizing just how strong the girl he'd purchased out of obligation truly was. Meanwhile, the children clung to her more than usual, Caleb refusing to let go of her apron, Rosie watching the horizon like she expected enemies to ride over it, and Luke trying to act brave, though his eyes betrayed fear. And Moriah understood then that the fight last night hadn't just been about her. It had been about this fragile family Elias had been trying to hold together with silence and stubbornness, and she felt a pull toward them, a fierce need to prove she belonged here, not as property, not as a purchased helper, but as someone who could steady the ground beneath their feet. However, danger was already creeping toward the Creed Ranch in shadows and whispers, because the men who had stormed in the night weren't acting alone. They belonged to a rival, rancher named Wade Hollister, a ruthless land baron who believed the frontier was his to control and had apparently paid Moriah's father before Elias unknowingly bought her contract. And rumors were spreading that Hollister wanted her not for marriage, not for care, but as leverage in a territorial war he intended to start. And Moriah, hearing the whispers from the kitchen door as cowhands mumbled over their coffee, felt a cold sickness settle in her stomach, realizing her father had sold her into something far darker than she imagined. By midday, Hollister's riders were spotted near the southern fence line, testing boundaries, kicking up dust, sending a clear warning, and Elias ordered his men to stay alert while he saddled up to ride the perimeter. But Moriah stopped him with a trembling breath, saying, "If this trouble is because of me, let me leave." And the way Elias turned sharply, storm-gray eyes blazing, made everyone freeze as he stepped toward her and said with a voice low and fierce, "You're not running. Not from me. Not from this. They'll have to go through me and every man on this ranch before they ever lay a hand on you." A promise she didn't know how to accept, a promise that wrapped around her heart like a protective shield even as fear gnawed at her ribs. While he was gone, the ranch felt like a ticking clock, every creak of a board or bark of a dog making the children jump. And Moriah tried to keep them busy, baking, tidying, humming old songs, but her own thoughts spiraled, wondering why Elias cared so deeply, wondering whether she was becoming more than a responsibility to him, wondering whether the warmth she felt every time he defended her was something she should fear or cherish. Hours later, Elias returned, dust-covered and stern, announcing that Hollister had posted armed men at the ridge overlooking their property. A direct threat, and the ranch hands erupted in anger, some demanding they strike first, others wanting to flee. And it was then Elias made a declaration that stunned the entire ranch. "If Hollister wants a war, he'll get one, but we protect our own first." And when he said "our own," his gaze held hers a heartbeat too long, sending a wildfire of emotions through her chest. But as night settled again, a quiet, Eerie tension filled the ranch, because Hollister wasn't a man who attacked twice. Openly, he preferred shadows, and when a lantern flickered strangely near the barn, when a horse screamed in panic, when a window shattered on the far side of the house, Elias grabbed his rifle and pulled, Mariah behind him as he barked for the children to get inside the cellar. And what followed was chaos, masked intruders bursting from the darkness, the ranch erupting in gunfire, Elias standing like a shield between Mariah and the attackers, fighting with a deadly intensity that made her realize he wasn't just defending her out of obligation, he was defending her because something inside him had already chosen her. And when the dust settled, when the intruders fled, leaving threats carved into the wooden fence, Elias finally turned to her, breathing hard, eyes blazing not with anger but fear, the fear of losing her, and he whispered hoarsely, "This ends now, Mariah. I won't let them take you. I'd burn the whole frontier down before I'd let them take you." A vow that would ignite the final battle brewing on the horizon, and would change the meaning of her place in the Creed family forever.